Okay. Call to order. Additional items. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our first item is a delegation. I'd like to invite Mr. David Beattie to come forward. He's with the New Way Community Society and he's here to speak about the Hello Project.
Right over here. The microphone isn't really a broadcast microphone. It just makes the voice heard at home on the web broadcasts.
Testing. Hello. It's no. Okay. Should I begin?
Please go ahead, sir. Welcome.
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Thank you very much for this opportunity for us to present to you. My name is David Beattie, and my colleague is Mr. Alan Hunt. We are the lead organisers of an initiative known as the Hello Project, which is part of a registered charity called the New Way Community Society. The point of our existence is to attempt to erode social isolation. I'm almost certain that all of the council members will know of the Vancouver Foundation study, which in 2012 resulted in the Connections and Engagement report. And so that has prompted the existence of this undertaking. What it is that we're attempting to do is to make known and very well understood a symbol, a logo, if you will, that will be worn chiefly on a lapel button, which will send a signal, we call it an icebreaker without saying a word, to whoever sees it, that it is soliciting, is inviting that person to have a chat with the wearer. So we often get that kind. Councillor Reid's response was curious and interesting. The greatest challenge that we have with this is, of course, to make it understood, the reason, explain to the 2.2 million residents of Metro exactly why this is being undertaken and what they should do with it. I'm not that familiar with the city of Coquitlam, but I'm certain that the city, like all of the others in Metro, is characterized by increasing multiculturalism and indeed multilingualism. And so that is a major, major factor contributing to this particular challenge, and why Metro seems to be particularly afflicted by this condition. And I just wanted to point out that as a result of the Vancouver Foundation study and a number of others, it's another group which I'm sure many of you know of, the Metro Vancouver Alliance, and indeed Vancouver Coastal Health, have all concluded that social isolation is indeed the top priority. If 100, 200, 1,000 residents of Metro are randomly selected and asked, what is your major concern? What do you like least about living in Metro Vancouver? They do not answer transit problems. It's not environmentalism. It's not the cost of housing. It is this condition of social isolation, which I'm sure you understand is a kind of a bi-directional, multi-directional phenomenon which underpins so many other of the ills that the region challenges. I'll just refer to my notes for a minute. It is our intention to, so we're in the business of fundraising. That's the position at which we're at now. Coquitlam is the 5th city council that we've made presentations to. We're sort of going in order of population, so we started with Vancouver, went to Surrey, Burnaby, Richmond, and now we're at Coquitlam. And we intend going to each of the 20 or so municipalities, and indeed to Metro Vancouver, the regional government, which I'm sure you know is taking this issue very seriously and has come up with a number of reports to attempt to deal with it. We believe, and it's been so far the project has been very well received, almost universally. Clearly, it's kind of unprecedented, highly innovative. We don't know of anything sufficiently similar, attempted on the same kind of scale, that we can draw any lessons from elsewhere. We have attempted to kind of beta test it, if you will, in a number of circumstances in certain coffee shops over 3 or 4 months, and on the back of a considerable media coverage that it received in February and March this year. And that's had considerable success. But it's very difficult to do a kind of a small sample of it, because it is the massive media campaign that's intended, that reaches a critical mass of people, wherein the success of the enterprise lies. So why have we come to the city of Coquitlam? First of all, to let you know about it, to talk to you about it face to face, and of course to invite any comments and questions that you have. But I'm sure that ultimately you realize that we will be coming cap in hand and ask you to make your contribution, along with all sorts of levels of government and other NGOs. It's our intention to apply to the Vancouver Foundation for a very significant grant in the order of about 100,000, and they know that, and we've had some initial negotiations with them. But we also believe that we have something to sell to the corporate sector. So we've approached a number of major coffee chains, Tim Hortons being case in point, and we're also in negotiation with them about having, their restaurants, their coffee shops play out as a place where the program is implemented in particular. So I will leave it at that for now. Again, thank you for the opportunity, and invite any questions or comments.
May.
Well, there's not enough hugs in the world, we know that, and you'll find out that this city council is probably the only one that gave hugs all around, no matter what happened before the election. I have a big wooden spoon for that later.
Inauguration.
But at our inauguration, I had people actually call and say, we thought that was so neat. So that's one thing. So what does your lapel pin say?
It's a good question. Thank you for that. I should have mentioned that. We don't know. That is the logo and the content of the button, and it will also be carried on coffee cups and T-shirts and other things, is still a work in progress. We've been to, this morning as a matter of fact, we went to the third advertising agency and to discuss the whole issue of the branding, which is a major, major part of it. And so that's still a work in progress. Yeah. In terms of myself, I've gone through a number of iterations. There's been hours and hours and hours of discussion around this. Should it have a language on it? Can it say hello? Does that not peg it to English-speaking culture? Should it just be a symbol? Round and round we go. Yet to be determined.
Mm-hmm. So it would be something very generic, like "Hello, can I help you?" or "Hello."
I think probably if it contained language, it would be "hello" as perhaps the central feature, perhaps the symbol for "ni hao" in Mandarin Cantonese and perhaps Punjabi. But then every time you put in a language, you have to leave others out.
The button's going to be this big.
It's going to have to be that big, or simply some kind of, character, or sort of the equivalent of the Nike swoosh, but better than that, and then explained what it's for and why. What do you do about it?
Okay. So what are you looking at for funding? You're going to all these cities, and are you going to base it on population, or are you basing it on some formula that you have? What kind of funding are you looking for?
As much as possible.
Well, so am I. It doesn't work so well. Yeah.
I take your point. I think that population seems to be that's a sensible and reasonable and fair measure. Or simply, what do you think that you can afford? What does the nature of the challenge mean to you in your city? Because it clearly has very, very severe, profound implications, social isolation and all sorts of other things.
Okay, so and I get that part.
Yeah.
So I get a little button and it has a little symbol, a happy face or something on it, or your new symbol. And someone comes up to me and I'm supposed to say, well, I want to talk to you to make sure that, your needs are your social needs are being met or whatever. I'm finding there's a lot of big holes in this. And I don't know how to fill them. And I don't know. So if we give money to do this, and then it's going to take a lot of money to get the brand out so that people know what I'm wearing this button for. I mean, we even go through right now victims of crime and that with the ribbons, and people will still ask what they are, and people from other cultures, I mean, I think the only one that sort of crosses all these multicultural things is the poppy. I mean, pretty well everyone knows what the poppy is for. So it's going to have to be something quite good. I think the daffodil now in the Canadian Cancer Society is that sort of becoming a little generic enough that people know what it is. So once you get the person and they say hello to me, what am I supposed to do with them then? Hug them, which is good.
That'll depend on those individuals and where it's happening. We like to say anybody, anywhere, anytime. So once it's, I don't think that the poppy and the daffodil campaigns those are the ones which are closest in nature to some extent. But this can apply to anybody who wants to use it. It will enjoy an advertising and media campaign that in the initial stages a huge launch, perhaps $200,000-300,000. So an absolutely colossal campaign, which is really pennies when you consider that a button, which would cost perhaps a dime to make if you make them in the hundreds of thousands, could go quite a long way to actually changing the social climate. There's actually be a cultural shift slightly initially as a result of this. So imagine two people or a number of people on the SkyTrain or on a bus, and they see somebody else with this, and it's been around for a week or two, and they feel sufficiently confident now because it's enjoyed a lot of exposure in ethnic media, in mainstream English language media, etc. They'll just go to somebody and say, "Hi, what's your name?" Or perhaps somebody will be a space on it for a person to write their name. "How are you today?" And then what people do with once that ice is broken is, of course, up to them. It could go in perhaps they'll get married. Perhaps they'll never see each other again. The sky's the limit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Brent?
Sure. I did see your hand, sorry. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you for your proposal. I think just to take off on May's, I think you've given us a rough concept of what you're talking about, but for us to consider it as a council, we need a full understanding and fleshed out of what you're actually up to. Social isolation is known by the city. It's been an issue that we've been dealing with in various parts through the multicultural community that I presently chair. We have a Welcome to event at the City of Coquitlam. We deal with ISS, Success, Share. All these groups are working on various programs dealing with people in social isolation. We, through the city, have been encouraged and helped at times fund neighborhood block parties and things like that to bring neighbors and neighborhoods together and encouraging that type of interaction with people in the community. So it is something that we have taken under our wing through various departments and various initiatives through, I would say a lot would be in our Parks and Recreation Department in the different areas and different programs we offer. Our Canada Day is a great way of bringing people together. But the Welcome To event that we hold every year is a tremendous success, bringing everybody, just whether they're new immigrants or regular people already living here, how to understand the city, what's available for them. So I appreciate your enthusiasm for your project, but we would need in the future for you to submit your whole program, what it's all about, what the emblem or the badge will be, for us to really take it past just thank you and hello for your, right now just a rough idea, right? And it needs to be formatted better. But just to let you know, it's something the region knows about. I think different cities are taking different tacks at it. I don't think there's one thing that will work at it. And it's an issue with technology today. Technology creates more isolation, and it's a concern for a lot of people and how you deal with that. So we're not unaware.
Thank you for your your questions, Councillor Asmunsen. I agree completely. And I think to Coquitlam's credit, this is the first time that we've presented at council in committee. Usually we only get an opportunity to present to full council in public session. So we have 5 minutes and they ask 2 questions and we're out the door. Of course, we have a very elaborate strategic plan committed to paper and digitally, which we can let you have, and a number of other, a whole file, a collection of documents which explain it in tedious detail. It is a work in progress. We expect to have a number of contacts with different levels of government and different each council, each city hall, as we go through those the procedure and the process towards a time when happily you may say yes to some sort of request from us or application, formal application for a grant, as so many other groups do. We're aware that there's not a lot of cash lying around, spare cash in boxes that you're looking for a home for. So we have to make a very compelling case, and we intend to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Beattie. Technical question first. This would all be handled by your organization, the New Way Community Society. Is that correct?
The New Way Community
Is that who's going to coordinate this?
Yes, the New Way Community Society is a registered charity, and its function has been to inclusivity in the sense of reaching out, especially to marginalized individuals, mostly in the city of Vancouver, but throughout Metro, to bring them into the mainstream. The organization that I founded, which was initially registered as a non-profit, is the Just Say Hello Society. It's since changed that name because people take that quite literally and they say, oh, it's just to say hello. And then it should have been called Don't Just Say Hello. So we've changed it to the Hello Project, and we've essentially merged with New Way Society so we can benefit from their charitable status. Otherwise, that takes years to do.
Yes, I understand.
But we have a number of, full-time staff, and that's the organization that would. But it's actually it's really a multi-partner coalition.
Got it. So what else does the New Way Community Society do? What's its track record of accomplishments in the past?
For about a year, it managed a large housing facility in Strathcona, which provided housing and special services for, I think, a dozen individuals with special needs.
Okay, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And just a general comment. I remember one of my favorite travel writers. Her name is Jan Morris, and she's written many travel books. And she famously, when she visits a city, she's acutely aware of various phenomena in the cities. And one of the things she does is conduct her famous smile test. You can Google Jan Morris's
I know the
smile
piece
test.
that you're referring to.
And I guess it was about 2 decades ago that she conducted her smile test in Vancouver and did not get a favorable response. And that has sort of stuck with the reputation, stuck with the city, and I guess by extension its suburbs. And it'd be nice to see that reputation changed, and this would have potential to do that. But as Councillor Asmundson said, and I think Councillor Reid suggested as well, that this is a good introduction. Thank you for doing that, coming in person to do that, not just sending us a letter. And we're looking forward to hearing more things in the future about this. Thank you.
Absolutely welcome. Thank you.
Now, the New Way Community Society is its main focus is the downtown east side. Right?
Has been hitherto.
Has been.
Yes.
I realize you've merged it for somewhat convenience.
Absolutely.
As well as anything else.
Yes.
Okay, so this isn't a downtown east side initiative. This is a pan-metro.
People say, who are you marketing it to? And I respond, who should we not market it to? Who should we leave out? Perhaps people under the age of 13, they don't really need, are they socially isolated? Perhaps they are. Do they need a button to break? It's for anybody, everybody, anywhere, anytime. But it makes sense with it. Clearly different kinds of people will feel confident using it under different circumstances. So women, some of them, or most perhaps, would use it in a coffee shop, which is a more controlled environment, whereas somebody like me would use it at a bus shelter at 11 o'clock at night. So, I mean, there's, the ripples, the implications and the possibilities are so vast, it's very difficult to predict exactly how it'll play out.
Fascinating. Councillor Wilson just reminded me that we have a project in Coquitlam by one of our high schools called Project Hello, which is that's actually an acronym for helping everyone locate loved ones, and it's focused on the downtown east side among homeless population, trying to get Christmas cards back to their homes in wherever across BC or across Canada. But so you may find a little bit of confusion as you go forward, just so you're aware of that one.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
And it's fascinating. Anybody else? No? Well, I thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. You'll be, we'll be in touch. Thank you.
We're forewarned.
Next item 2 is the minutes of the Council and Committee meeting of Monday, December 8th. Recommendation to approve.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor, opposed, carried unanimously.
Item 3 is a report of staff. It concerns Leigh and Victoria Parks. It's a planning and design update. We have introductory comments by the acting general manager of the department and a presentation by the director of the planning and business services.
Thank you, Jay. Your Worship, Council, I just want to make some brief opening comments. Michelle Hunt, Director of Planning and Business Services with our department, will be doing a brief presentation. You've got the report in front of you. Raj Singh, who's our parks planner, landscape architect, is also here with us. He was responsible, along with the planning team, to put together the concepts in front of Council today. I just want to remind Council, we did come forward with Leigh Park a few months back. There were some questions around some of the concepts identified at that time. We have gone back and tried to answer some of those questions for Council, as well as bringing it back together with Victoria Park. If you recall, Victoria Park at the time was still in some questions around ownership, and we've since worked out some of those issues with the school district, and we are bringing both back. They are intended to be complementary parks, and the concept that you'll see today, I just want to highlight, do try and build something for everybody. That's our goal. We are trying to build assets and needs that identify a number of strategic plans, including the off-skills bike skills issue, or bike skills needs that were identified historically, as well as some of the off-leash needs that we feel are growing in the area. We also want to just highlight the fact that these are, particularly Leigh, is a very steep property, and there's some discussion around the best utility of that kind of a site and the assets that it does represent, including the slope and the trees. We'd be glad to take Council's comments following the presentation in some direction. So I'll just give that over to Michelle to do the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So just quickly, I'm going to run through the process to date, because this has been ongoing for a couple of years. Just look at the context of Leigh and Victoria Parks, then run through the various options that we've looked at, talk about funding and timing. So this started a couple of years ago when the budget was set up in our capital plan for both Leigh and Victoria. And that initiated the planning work. We got a landscape architect firm on board and started the conceptual planning back in July, August of 2013. The first report came to Council and Committee in July of 2013, and then Council directed staff to take that through the Universal Accessibility Committee, as well as start meeting with some of the other stakeholders, as well as the public open house. That culminated in a report last year in November on the conceptual design for Leigh Park. And at that time, as Ms. Dalloweva mentioned, we were directed to finalize the land assembly with the school district on Victoria and then come back again with both concepts. So just to put this in perspective, both these parks are in the northeast, and they're about a couple hundred meters apart from each other. Victoria Park obviously is already developed, and Leigh Park is an undeveloped site. So when we were here last year, as we mentioned, we were asked to finalize the land assembly of Victoria Park and then work on these together. They definitely do provide the ability to provide complementary programming, and so that we can provide amenities for the whole community up there. A couple of issues that came up was around parking and also around the dog off-leash area that was brought up last year. As I mentioned, they're only about a couple hundred meters apart, sort of kitty corner there. Really, Victoria Park is meant for some active programming. It currently has an open grass field, a baseball diamond, playground that's a few years old. And Leigh Park is undeveloped, but it has that ability to provide some unique programming, such as the bike skills park and the off-leash area. As Ms. Delahueva mentioned, there are several other strategies that mention Leigh Park in particular, and Victoria Park with regard to the sports fields, the off-road cycling, and off-leash. So this is the first concept for Leigh Park, and this is the one that we talked to Council about last year. It basically takes advantage of some of the existing features that are there. So right now there's sort of an existing entryway on Sobol at the corner of Sobol and Roxton there, an informal trail that traverses the park. We've incorporated the off-leash area. Looks fairly large, but the topography here is very steep. So in the bottom bit, and made it large enough that it will help preserve, some of the vegetation and the soil and that. If you put a lot of dogs in a very small area, it tends to become a bit of a mud pit. So this allows for, some space for them to run around as well as some trail for walking. And I just going to make the point here that, the off-leash area is really for the residents that have dogs. It's not about the dogs themselves. It's about allowing families and people that do have dogs to come to the park and enjoy the space with, the dog that's part of their family. It also incorporates at the top to the north there. Did you say? Oh, yeah, here. The Adventure Bike Skills Park, which is a sort of combination with what we have up at Mariner as well as over at Town Centre. So some dirt sort of tracks, but also some of the trick areas and some of the wooden bridges and that kind of thing. So a little bit of both there. And it includes the trails that loop throughout. So Council last year had asked us about incorporating a sport court or tennis courts into the park, and to do that we sort of flipped them. We put the bike skills at the lower part and then put in the tennis court. A couple of downsides on this is because of the steep terrain, that those sport courts or tennis courts would require a fairly substantial retaining wall, which would add probably about $500,000 to the cost of the project, and quite frankly not look terribly nice either. So my personal opinion on that. It also moves the bike skills to the bottom part. Now, you can't see by these diagrams, but that's incredibly steep. So, some of the smaller bikers, the novice bikers, I'm thinking the little ones, wouldn't be terribly good for them to be, it's quite a steep slope of them sort of biking up and down in that area. We then looked at to keeping the dog off-leash area and replacing the tennis courts with that in the area here. But as I mentioned, when you start putting a lot of dogs in a very small area, there's the potential for more conflict. There's the, it erodes the vegetation, the trees, the understory, a little bit more. So although it could work, we don't feel that that's a good use of that particular part of the park. Moving on to Victoria Park. So the option that went forward last year, and which we took to the public open house, was a north-south Super 8 field with the baseball diamond. Now what this really is a flexible green space. There's no lines as such. So this could be used by baseball. It could be used by soccer. Obviously, there would be goals, but it's really just a big grassy open area. We would improve the drainage. We would remove the gravel tracks. I don't know what you call them, the technical term for them, the base, running from base to base. Base paths? Okay. Thank you. No, I'm not. Sorry. The other thing we've done here is move the sport court and youth area away from Holtby Street. That was some feedback we had from the public open house, concerns from the residents that it would be noisy to hear bouncing balls, and so taking the liberty to sort of move the playground a bit. We will maintain as many of the playground pieces as we can, but some of them are quite old and not. A couple of them are about 5 years old. A few of the pieces are about 5 years old, and those we would retain for sure. So then we looked at option 2 here, which is incorporating the same features but putting the soccer field to east to west, which actually allows it to be that much bigger. Again, it's still an open multi-purpose green space, but for soccer it would allow a much bigger field. The rest of the park stays the same on that one. So what we would recommend is that for Leigh Park we would go with option 1, which incorporates the dog off leash in the lower part of the park where it's quite steep, and the off road or the bike skills to the north, as well as it does include the picnicking. Again, it's sort of an open grassy area with some picnic tables, possibly a shelter, for picnicking and throwing a frisbee around, that kind of thing. And for Victoria Park, what we would recommend is going with the field running east to west to provide a bit more space. As I mentioned, the funding was set up back in 2012, and I'm just going to take a minute to talk about this, because the funding that was set aside was based on our DCC program. So when we come up with our DCC program, which we do, every few years, we take an average of parks that have recently been built, and we apply a unit cost, and we come up with a very sort of broad number. Moving forward, we're not going to be setting up our capital budgets solely based on the DCC program. We want to get in and do a little bit more planning so that we know what amenities we're actually going to put in the park, and then bring forward the budget with the detailed design process. So we have gone back and double-checked that this money is set aside, and can we complete the parks and the amenities that we're proposing within this funds, and we can. But just to say that once we get into the detailed design, we will be bringing back those final budget numbers for council to see that, because this is a very high level number. So our timing on this is, once we've had your feedback today, to continue on with the detailed design and do up the contract drawings so that we can tender for construction in early spring next year. We would then look at starting construction of Leigh Park next year, and defer Victoria until towards the end of the year, beginning of 2016. We do want to time the development of the multi-use pathway at the south end of the park with what transportation is going to be doing with widening Victoria Drive and putting in parking, and so it makes sense from a city perspective to gain some efficiencies in construction of those two elements together. So 80% of the park would be done sort of in 2016, and then when they complete the widening of Victoria Drive, we would finish the multi-use pathway. Don't believe that would have any real impact on the park users, or it would just be the pathway that would be need to be finished. I think that brings me to the end of the presentation.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
I'll pass, because you end up answering the question I was going to ask. Thank you.
Okay.
Complimentary questions?
With
Exactly.
With an irony.
The editor and me kept cringing every time.
Sorry.
No. It's one of those big ones.
It was right in the next paragraph. I saw it correctly. Apologies.
Councillor Hodge, Asmundson, and Reid.
Good. Great presentation. I'm just crossing out questions as you went
good.
along. So you
Like
got a
that.
lot of. No, you did a good job. A couple
It's
things.
only going to take 10 minutes.
You're kind of from 20 down to 10. This is a park that I've used for many years, and my kids have used it, so I'm familiar with a lot of the features that are here. One that isn't marked here, and I had a question, I don't see it here, was the washrooms. There's currently washrooms down beside Victoria Park. I'm just wondering if there's a plan to keep those, expand those, or what's the plan around washrooms?
Certainly to keep them. No, we have not had any discussion around expanding them, but yeah, they would definitely
They're
stay.
sort of a standalone because they're not marked, so that's
Yeah.
fine, good. The discussion around the covered shelter. Shelters are sort of one of those, they can be an asset and they can be a problem, as well as we know we've had issues around the shelters and others, vandalism. We had one that we lost to fire. I'm just sort of wondering if that's something that there's a need for here. I don't know that this is really going to be a picnic destination, given that it's not really like a Mundy Park type of a thing. It's more like a Glen Park or that kind of a park. And I'm just sort of wondering, maybe you could just sort of comment a little bit about the shelter. I know in the report it calls for some indoor sort of type activities, but I'm wondering if that would be outweighed by some of the nuisance factors of having a sheltered area at nighttime could cause.
Just to clarify, the shelter in Victoria Park or Leigh Park?
Or no, the one in Victoria Park is what I'm talking about here. Is calls for a shelter here in Victoria Park, a picnic shelter.
It's got the same wording in both parks.
Yeah.
15.
But the same would apply in both.
It is definitely an optional amenity. It's something that could be, added at a later date. It's actually something we've added into the gift program if the community feels that, it's something they want and there is a donor. In speaking to staff, I think the issues we get with the picnic shelters are when they're in sort of the urban settings, and that's when you get people that are, like close to the SkyTrain or close to, where there's lots of people. We haven't had many issues with the picnic shelters that are in sort of these neighborhood-type parks. I think in the summer, we know we get bookings for birthday parties in these neighborhood park picnic shelters, and so that's where they're really useful when somebody wants to hold a birthday party.
If I can just make a comment as well. I thank you, Michelle, that comment. Certainly usability we find in the summer. There's also the, we're expanding programs like Park Spark and other type of outdoor recreational programming, and these amenities just allow us a little bit more programming opportunities in parks where we have them. So we certainly take the opportunity. It could be, as Michelle has also mentioned, we do have these in our donor program. They're more expensive items, they're legacy items, but if council really feels that, we do have the funding for it, but we think from a methodology perspective, it really ought to be represented in these neighborhood parks.
I was coming at it from the families just having picnics like we do in Blue Mountain, but you're coming at it from the programming and the ability to do programming on rainy days. So that's certainly, that makes sense. I agree with the tennis. Originally, I was one of the ones that was really pushing for a sport court and tennis up at Leigh, but I think you make some good points. Certainly, it was interesting to see the stats on dog ownership that's doubled in 4 years. From talking to people up in Burke Mountain, there is a real want for an off-leash area. I do think we need tennis, but I think you're correct in saying that there's probably a better place. My concern would be in a park that's relatively small, that this could be the dominant feature in that park. And I think that in an area where there's a lot of treed and natural surroundings, I don't know that I would want to make that the key feature. So I agree with you. And actually, I think your placement is good. The only concern that I would have on if it's option 1. Is the proximity, because now we've placed the dog park down closest to the school. And I know that it's not going to be quite as close to the playground. We had this concern over Glen Park a couple of years ago. We put a dog park in at Glen, and then it was right up against the fence. So here there's going to be a real strong buffer, so that we're not, and I believe at the school that's the parking lot up there. So. Right. So we should be. So we have a natural buffer here that we didn't in other places. So I think your idea of how you use the slopes for the two, I think, is good. And my final comment is I've been saving for the last, which is we're going to hear a lot about, and it doesn't matter what kind of a development we do in a neighborhood, it's parking. And I think having Leigh open up all the way around now is going to create parking. It's always a challenge with neighbors who park on the park side, but at least there's a lot of parking there. But I'm just wondering if you could just sort of maybe explain a little bit more about the options for Victoria Park. I know that in the widening of Victoria, I believe we had Victoria Drive. There was going to be parking there, which is now a ditch. But I'm just wondering maybe around the other three sides of Victoria Park. It's not really as detailed in the report on Victoria as it is on Leigh.
Okay. So transportation has not done any sort of detailed study, and they can do that if you wish. But we've looked at both parks and the parking around the perimeter there. So for Victoria in particular, we're looking at about 61 stalls, and when we look at the programming for the sport field and Victoria Hall, we're thinking the demand will be around 45. So we're feeling like there is enough parking on street there with the 61 stalls. And then up at Leigh Park, we're looking at about 49 stalls once those streets are completed. As I say, this is based on park planning's estimates and not based on a detailed study by transportation planning, which they could do. But as I say, based on what we think the usage is going to be in Victoria Park with the hall and the sport field, we believe that there is enough parking there.
My only comment would be, and we've had this discussion around this table before, it's shared use, and it drives me crazy to see cars parked in neighborhoods right next to a chained-off school parking lot. And we have Leigh School that has spots at the front of the school that's traditionally chained off on the weekend, and the ability to have access to parking. I don't know if we've entered into discussions. I know we've been in other facilities, but I think we have to take a more global approach that even if we're not using this particular school or they're not using this particular park, I think we still have to look at parking throughout our city, whether it's on our property or school property, as being shared parking, and it would just, I'd hate to see 20 spots locked off on a Saturday when we've got activities going on in both of these parks and the hall.
If I can make a comment about parking, just following up on that, just a little bit more global. The location of parks historically, for a time, was to a degree predicated on minimizing frontages, and this is because of costs typically not borne by development cost charges. But that doesn't create very prominent parks. So we're moving to a paradigm where parks are much more prominent, more street frontages. They're more expensive to build, but they create better parks. So you'll see that most of our parks, certainly when we have an opportunity, we will build the frontages. And for neighborhood parks, we would not traditionally build parking lots. The perimeter of that park is intended to provide the service. It's only in community parks where we would have larger facilities that might require destination parking. So that's more of my global comments. In terms of the school district, we are actually talking about a number of sites, and that has come up through our discussions with the school district, including Leigh. There are some challenges around the city's, what liabilities the city might take on by actually opening the parking lot. So we are actually in very, interesting discussions with the school district around shared use. We believe that there needs to be a real complementary, there's the word again, but use of those facilities, and the city ought not to have to take on liabilities around school district properties if we use the parking lot, but they do own assets, and there's lots of questions around how we manage that, whether we have the keys, whether we program the parking lot. The discussions are ongoing, but it's the discussion that we're having not just here on Miller, a number of other joint use sites. This one isn't one of them, but certainly we know the complementary use to the Victoria Hall and these facilities. Now both parks, because this parking lot is in the middle of both parks, we do need to have those discussions, and they are on the table.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Asmussen, Councillor Reid, Councillor.
Thank you. I'm going to sort of take off on what Craig had mentioned earlier and just start with parking. There is an issue of parking right now. I live very close to this area. When you start combining more community activities or games on the field in conjunction with Victoria Hall and the bookings that are going on in Victoria Hall and the parking that's going on and there, the neighborhood right now is street parking is quite full. So, and I think as you look and expand, residents will look for increased parking opportunities for themselves. That will reduce the impact. So I think my concerns also relate to the future Sobol Street alignment and the change in parking in front of Victoria Hall. And actually, I can understand from engineering is that Sobol is going to shift to better align with APEL and how that affects the parking for Victoria Hall and Victoria Park down there. I think that's something that needs to be considered. I'll echo what Councillor Hodge said about the school board and parking and using their parking lots. I find it interesting to comment about liability and us accepting liability. Should we have them accept liability in our parking lot that they're using at Millard Middle School? So, I mean, it goes both ways. We've offered them parking for many years with no strings attached on it. I really do think that they should be offering all the schools. I think it's a red herring. It's not valid. And if they're going to play that game, we should play the same game going back to them at any others at Millard Middle. I mean, we've done that for them. So I do think, and that's just a bigger issue than Leigh Park or Victoria Park. That's about all our parks in all our neighborhoods. Being a good neighbor, working with it. On the Leigh Park in question, we're going to be building parks in northeast Coquitlam, Parting Creek, and we're going to be dealing with steeper slopes. So we will be doing retaining walls. This will not be an area that, so it will be a cost in any park. It all depends. And I still have issues with the reduction of activities. You've pretty much made the Leigh Park a passive park, unperiod, right? and we're having a dog off-leash area down there, and I'm concerned about being the only area. But when I look at the map, and I look at one of the biggest areas is the hydro right-of-way that we have already up in the northeast. We've used the hydro right-of-way for our off-road dog off-leash off Mariner. Why wouldn't we be considering the same thing up in this area for a dog off-leash area with hydro, as it's already a permitted use that we're doing it already?
We did look at, through the chair, we did look at the BC Hydro right-of-way there. And really it came down to it being very, very narrow. It's narrow, and with the houses on both sides and the existing trail that's going through there, we just decided, looked at it and said there's not enough space there for the off-leash area. So it was considered, but it just didn't feel like there was enough space. I can't remember the exact width between the two, basically the two fence lines, but it wasn't large enough.
Okay, I just find it interesting that because if this is the only dog off leash, as Councillor Hart said, it's going to create an extreme demand within that area. And I think you really do have to look at, even if it's narrow in those areas, to increase your areas for dog off leash in certain areas. You can have a longer straight run rather than because a lot of animals just want that straight running back and forth. But I do think we have to find other options. I think Leigh Park provides a small off-leash area, and I think you have to be careful of all the type of different sizes of dogs that are going to go in there and the conflicts that may include there. I still would like to see more. I guess my question is for the General Manager of Engineering. I noticed in all your content for Leigh, the utility right-of-way there that you have not, but can you put anything over top of that utility right-of-way, or does that have to be totally left alone?
Through your worship, it depends on the agreement between ourselves and the utility company. In some instances, we put there, say, a pathway, and generally speaking, BC Hydro, for good reasons, don't want to see anything that's above ground, even if it's just a couple of
But I'm talking about in Leigh Park, going from the top corner down to the bottom corner. Yeah, I thought that was a city utility. I thought that was storm and sanitary.
Again,
Here?
if it's a city utility, we can, but we don't want to see structures within that right away. We don't want to see even trees in many cases.
But if it's a field or something like an open field,
that can happen, yes. Although fields come with drainage, but still it's workable.
okay. Thank you. That's just a concern. I could see Alderman, you just sort of eliminated a lot of design options because of that, with redesigning some of your fields or your dog off leash or that type of stuff.
If I can make a comment, the sports field strategy talked about 3 fields in the northeast. So we are working to that. Aside from Gillies Field, Gillies Trail, the field facilities that we'll have in there in the long term, the idea was that there'd be one in the, I guess, the property in Upper Hyde, the original shared school park site, the Smiling Creek property, and then this property. So that's our minimum field complement. These are typically Super 8 fields. We have enough for a larger field at Smiling Creek. We are working with the school district on the potential for shared use facilities at the high school. Right now, we own property there. So there's opportunities to expand our overall asset, including potential for hard courts or tennis. So there's some things we are thinking about. But in terms of the allocation of another field at Leigh, we did not put it on the concept because of not necessarily the constraints around the utility corridor. It was around the fact that the strategic plan really limited our number of fields to what we had.
But even with fields, you could do the off-leash area, or you could have done the bike within that area to be the same type of use. You could have, I'm just saying you left out a certain amount of design ability if you'd gone over the right-of-way. As long as it's nothing that can be, I think, nothing permanent or structure that could be taken up in case of need to do it, right? So that was just my one concern, is that you limited your ability to fully design different things by you could redesign the off-leash area, you could redesign the bike area by not using it just such as a separation line. That's what it seems to be to me.
Sorry, through the chair, just to make a comment, Councillor Anderson, we also looked at the trees. So, of course, there's, it's not necessarily a limitation of that corridor, but it's also, if we would be removing more trees if we, right? So we wanted to retain the trees. The other thing I just want to point out is in our master plan work, outdoor recreation is huge for people. So off-road bicycling, the off-leash areas, hiking, all of that is coming through loud and clear. People really want those passive activities. So as much as, yes, we have the sports activities, the programming that's in this park is something that we're hearing from residents that they would like to see.
Well, I think, I even had a resident meet me on Sunday on our street about trail connections. And I think in the Northeast it's going to have a tremendous amount of trail network that's not there yet. So I think that's maybe driving some of this stuff. There is going to be a lot of passive trail work connections for people as the mountain grows. So duplicating that in sometimes parks maybe not be necessary because you're going to have a lot of that throughout the city. Craig will know that. We know about a lot of trails that start and don't connect, don't go anywhere. My comments on Victoria Park is, you talk about the backstop is going to need to be replaced for baseball.
Yes.
But our field sports strategy points out that baseball participation is declining quite rapidly. And baseball, I know because I live in that area, when kids play t-ball or other ball, they do not play at Victoria Park. They play up on the school property up there, on the gravel fields up there. And Victoria is never used for any type of organized, even from Port Coquitlam, that comes out there. They go up to Leigh School. So I can understand, but I'm just wondering the need for baseball in there. And I know you've taken out the lines, but putting in a new backstop, is it necessary?
We don't know. We certainly we've identified it as needing replacement ultimately. The report says that this is going to be really a pickup. Like you've mentioned, it's not going to be a formally programmable baseball diamond. It's going to have no base paths, but the existing backstop can remain in place. And we're going to look. It's not budgeted in our program, right? It's about $50,000. We've said if there's room and if it's starting to and we see there's a lot of community play, we would then find dollars potentially through our infrastructure dollars, which are not part of the budget here. So the park infrastructure dollars that we have annually, that we potentially expect to have annually to fund some of these replacements, would potentially be made available. But at this point in the program, we've said it looks like it probably needs replacing, but we're not going to budget for it. We're going to focus on the rest of the park assets and see where we're at.
I've talked to all the baseball groups, and they don't foresee using baseball. But even when they did use baseball, they kept the kids 10 and under, because kids older than that age, if they hit the ball from that backstop, it's going to go on the road. Right. So that's the other issue. So you allow adults down there, unless you, leads to my other question, are you going to be putting fencing along the Victoria side?
Yes.
At a high level or just a low level fence?
And you can see it in the actual plan. It shows the fence. Sorry, that's the wrong one.
It shows the fence.
There's a fence.
So is it going to be like a 10-foot fence or like a 3-foot fence? That's what.
I think it would be high enough to keep balls in. Raj, any? 1.2 meters.
4 feet.
4 feet.
4 feet.
Yeah. So
it won't keep balls.
Won't be baseball.
It won't be baseball. It's really just So we would, and if you look at ideally, obviously the backstops for where the nets are typically are higher, but this one is really just to keep balls away from the street. We could budget for a higher fence, but then we'd have to figure out what that might be.
Something that's been raised to me by baseball over the years about the park and why they don't use it. I mean, the baseball diamonds out degraded and they didn't use, but
Yes.
it also the use was anybody over 10. As they said, we put them down there. We're putting balls on the street. We're going to have people come in for claims, so they don't put any kids older than that down there.
We didn't just want to eliminate the backstop. That's what we felt. Just leave it there. If there's some pickup community, some families come down to play, some friends, fine. But it isn't programmed as a baseball facility. So we felt that it still has merit in keeping it. It's not obstructing the new Super 8 field, and it could still provide a community amenity, at least for the time being. If it starts to wear down and we feel that there's little utility, then we would look to eliminate it. If we're still getting lots of community play, we would say, hey, let's keep an eye on that because it may be beneficial to replace it.
And one last question is about the sport court at, I think, well, Councillor Hodge and I have talked about the needs for sport courts. When I look at this, and it's hard to get the dimensions of it down. The size of it looks fairly limited in comparison. What's it in comparison, let's say, to Millard, Orchard Park, and Galloway? What's it? Is it the same size? Is it smaller? Because when I look at this, it seems like you're just trying to fit in with the existing pathway system there, and it just looks.
Basically,
But is it the same size as the ones at Galloway and Millard?
I don't think there's I don't think we've sized it to fit pre-established paths. We've
Okay.
actually, the paths are, so we can look to not oversize it, but look to see whether we can expand it a little bit.
And I just like going to
we can
option
certainly
2
do
rather
that.
than the other one, or maybe with the baseball diamonds further in, the option 1 with the option 2
It's a little bit more space.
gives you maybe some more space to
okay.
increase the size of the sport court.
Yeah, yeah. We'll look to do that. It's not driven by the paths. The paths were really put there following the actual half court being
Yep.
placed and located properly.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Councillor Reid?
Okay, I have three things. So the first thing, I don't know, before you two came on the scene in Parks and Leisure, this was one of the things I was most proud of, was some folks in Parks and Leisure took it upon themselves to find some older equipment in other parks, offer it, put it up here because of the building. So all along Wilkie and down Holtby and those little side streets, we have massive townhousing. And it's starter entry townhousing. Those employees actually came up, they spaced it, they dug it up. Are you aware of all
Yes,
this?
we are.
Yeah. You're aware of that all the neighbors came out with their shovels and rakes and planted bulbs and did this? And now we're going to rip it all up for something else. So I hope you're going to have some nice way of doing this, because it's really kind of crappy to do that to them. I went to Mosaic because we didn't have any tiny pot stuff and got them to donate $12,000. So not all the equipment is old. We bought half a dozen pieces with that money for the tots. So, and you're digging that up as well.
But yes, and it's a great point. We were fully aware of it. We do believe that leaving it as it is, when we're redoing the entire park, we do feel we can get some participation from the community through the process. We can also
Don't
reuse.
ask them to rebuild it again,
No, but we do have.
acknowledge what they've done.
Yes, and there's a number of pieces we can reuse, but we do feel it's time to refresh the park with that in mind. We will do it sensitively and make sure that they're aware of why we're doing it.
Mosaic are new.
Yes, and those can be reused.
Okay, so I just think this is really sensitive. Here we go out and we really try to encourage our staff to come up with great ideas and helpful, and then we encourage a community to come and chip in with real live labor, and then, oh well, here comes the city, fill it out, get something else. I'm not impressed with that, I will tell you. I also want to talk about parking, like everyone else has, along Holtby and Wilkie, never mind Victoria and all the Poco folks. But why can't we put parking in when, like you do at Blue Mountain, so that it heads in, so that we can get more?
Sorry, through the chair, that you're talking about angled parking?
Yeah.
Angled parking, for most of the road allowance widths, it's not really, it doesn't fit well.
Yeah, that's good enough. That's all I need to know. So from now on, I think we better start working with planning, and when we have parks, maybe we better start contemplating doing some of this stuff, because we're going to need it. The parking is ridiculous. When you say there's 61 pieces and only 45 are going to be used for the dog patch, well, that's great, except that there's probably 55 people already using the 61 spots before you even contemplate using any of it for parking. So we keep saying, oh, well, there's street parking, and I object to that. Every time I get a development in front of me, says, oh, well, they're just making it, and besides, there's 30, 40 street parking. No, there's not, because we can't keep using the same numbers over and over in the same neighborhood, and they're already used anyhow, so the parking is just asinine. That is basically all I have, except I like the sports courts, and I like all the stuff that you've done, and the fellows that use it, I mean, they've got lots of good information for you. But I am absolutely really upset about having a neighborhood come out like they did, and then we come along a year later and dig it all up. That's disrespectful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zerillo.
Hi. I just wanted to question about, you mentioned that this passed through universal accessibility, so I'm wondering what was incorporated from that feedback that we got from universal accessibility in this park. I know one of the things that Councillor Adjournment just said is some of the parks dead end, and I know that's something that's come back from universal accessibility is when you get to a dead end, it's really unfortunate to shovel.
So because we're in the conceptual design at this point, so things like making the pathways, the slopes of the pathways, those are the types of things that, once we get it, that we can incorporate right now is making sure the grading of those paths are correct. Once we get into the detailed design, though, that's when we go back to the Universal Accessibility Committee, probably 2 or 3 times during the process as the design gets a little bit further along, and at that point. They had asked for washroom facilities in Victoria Park, which there is one there. I'm just looking at some of the other things. We did it, actually, most of it we did incorporate what they'd asked for. They'd asked for incorporating a dog wash station, and water for the dog area, which we've done. Consider paving double gate entry area, which is better for the wheelchairs, so we've incorporated that. Providing shade, so we've done that with the picnic shelter. So yeah, we actually have taken their feedback and incorporated as much as we can. I think the biggest one was around Victoria Park and adding more accessible washroom facilities, and we have not done that.
Because when you're mentioning that, I wasn't thinking that they would use Leigh at all if they had accessibility challenges just because of the slopes. But the accessible washroom would be very interesting because we're going to have a lot of grandparents coming in to use that Victoria Park. So the only notes that I kind of made was just the idea about the passiveness of the parks. Right now, both of the parks, I know one of them is not even a park, but it is used by kids that are riding their bikes. And I think I mentioned this last time we talked about it, is when we start structuring the parks in this way, it limits the amount of people that can use it at any one time. I even know along Mariner there, where the bike paths are, you can really only get about 4 kids at any one time because of the width of things and getting in the way. So those would be the only things to watch out for, is just, even when we talk about the soccer field, it just removes the friendly access that lets a bunch of kids go and run the ball. If we're programming there, they lose it. And dog walking, we know in Mundy Park that we get a lot of conflict between walkers and bike riders and dog walkers. And I think to Councillor Osmundson's point, if we have a play off-leash that's only small dogs can be in it, the big dogs are going to be on the path, and I just worry about that a little bit. But other than that, that washroom would be so important right there. That's accessible on the Victoria side. On the Leigh side, I think the slope is prohibitive. But on the Victoria side, it would be wonderful to have, and I'd like to see the money go more into that than to, as Councillor Reid said, sharing up stuff that's working and has emotional, sentimental value to the community. Thank you so much for the report.
Yeah, Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. I think these are great. In terms of Leigh Park, just hoping you can keep as much in the natural state as possible. I love driving by Leigh School and just seeing the kids playing in the trees and everything. So it looks like you were trying to do that. On the attachment, in terms of the consultation, there was a request for fitness circuits somewhere in the Northeast, and just wondering if there was any potential for doing that along the path in Leigh Park, or you have it planned for another park in the future.
The outdoor fitness equipment?
Yeah.
We haven't included it in. Again, it's in our donation program, so we can identify locations for it. But Yeah, it's. I think. I mean, definitely in Leigh, we could where the grassy area is. That would be a prime spot for some of that outdoor fitness equipment. But
Raj, any thoughts on that?
We're going to put them probably mostly along the looping trail. So as you're walking, you stop, rest, use your chin up.
Right.
There are spots that we can rest either along the looping trail that are currently designed for you to fly.
Yeah, I was just curious, or
Yeah.
or if you had another park down the road in mind for the fitness stuff. Also in that consultation, there was a comment, there was concern for skate park. There was nine people expressed concern about the skate park. So was that a positive concern or a negative concern for the skate park? In Victoria Park, I guess it would be.
I believe it was a negative concern for the skate park, but it was the fact that it was close to the residence. So we've moved that further into the park a little bit. But although it still allows for good sight lines, it's an open park. So yeah, I think it was just the proximity to the residents on Holtby there.
And what kind of skate park do you see that being? Like in the picture, it looks fairly flat. Is it more of a beginner type?
Yes, fairly modest. One of the things we've noticed actually throughout the city is the lack of youth amenities, and so it's really providing a spot for them to hang out. So yes, it's got some skate, but it's a meeting place, and having the playground and being able to take their skateboard or their scooter and go back and forth. It's certainly not a great big destination type spot, but yeah.
But would there be like banked edges
Yeah.
and that sort of thing? The current bike skills park at Mariner, do we have an idea of how well it's being used now and the take-up on it?
It's been very well used. Yeah, we've had lots and lots of positive comments, and it's an amenity that is being well used.
And then I just had the similar concerns about the parking, but I'm just wondering, when Councillor Reid was asking about angled parking, maybe did you mean perpendicular parking rather than angled parking? Because that's what we have in Blue Mountain, it's perpendicular. That would allow more parking than angled, I'm assuming?
It really is that the perpendicular parking or even angled parking is really only conducive to really undeveloped or wider road allowances. When you actually build the road allowance, as most of these are going to be constructed to a municipal standard, unless you build in additional meters of dedication, you cannot accommodate. You really can't. So you'd have to actually dedicate 2 or 3 meters along the entire length of the park to accommodate perpendicular or angled parking, and that would be something we don't do today. We would. I should note these are neighborhood parks. Again, even though there is a destination component to every park, I would say that is the smaller component. These are intended to serve mostly people that come and through the neighborhood, in the neighborhood. So when it comes to a community level park, we certainly would look at parking options such as an actual parking facility or wider dedicated areas to do more things on the street. So that's the reason. We certainly hear the comments. But fortunately, we do feel there's enough road allowances here to serve these level of parks quite well. Obviously, we can see that there's pre-existing parking conditions. I would note that we're really helping one of those through the work we're proposing on Roxton. Currently, Roxton is a reduced road allowance, and one of the older neo-traditional road standards, we're actually pulling out some of that curb, and we're going to be adding parking where none exists today, all along Roxton. So that is a real benefit to this park project. So we are trying to address the issue as best as we can.
On Roxton, it looks like there's 5 bulges, 2 on each end, 1 on each end, and then 3 in the middle.
Yes, that there's a pre-existing curb that was built as part of the road project and the development project. That curb-to-curb distance does not permit parking on both sides. So we acknowledge that that's not a tenable for us. We're adding a park, creating a new park. We're not going to put all the parking on the north side where the residents are. We do need to make sure that our park development actually provides some parking supply for the park. So we are moving the curbing, and we're going to be creating parking for the park side.
And at Victoria right now, there's parking on the south side of Wilkie, but there's a gravel and it's not very well finished. Is that going to be part of this plan, or is that a separate project. Unless it's been done in the last year, but I remember being there and it was all.
I believe that one is going to remain with parking supply, but on an informal basis.
Because you can't park on the north side of Wilkie, I believe.
Right.
So residents are from those buildings and guests from those buildings are already parked
On the south
side.
side.
Of it.
Yeah.
Any plans for a concrete curb and gutter?
It's
along there?
not. I don't believe it is in the current budget for this project. We are doing Leigh, but we're not doing Victoria.
And just out of curiosity, is that just lack of budget or a philosophical reason, or?
Mostly budget. I would say our goal would be to do as much as we could. It's over $100,000 probably to finish that entire road edge, and there's some slope, and we'd have to deal with that. Certainly, as part of the reporting out, we could look at adding that component to council in the detailed budget. I do think it would add some benefit, but we are getting additional parking on the other road allowances in this park. So we're trying to be measured in terms of how those costs are being distributed to benefit the park.
Extra parking for Victoria because of the
Victoria Road.
Right.
Yeah, so Victoria Avenue, I guess, is a capital project under the DCC program. It will be completed by Engineering and Public Works in 2017, and that will create value for the park as well through the addition of on-street parking.
Great. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. I want to echo May's concerns about relocating or in any way diminishing the work that was already done. That we were there for the opening. We saw the enthusiasm of a group of parents. From their perspective, that's brand new equipment. That's it's not there are much worse playgrounds that kids still value and still play on, and we're not contemplating removing those. There's much worse backstops, and it would trouble me if we're going to take out not our worst backstop and replace it with a brand new backstop on an unofficial field. So I don't want to see us heading in that direction either. But I'd love to see an option 2B that contemplates working its way around the existing equipment more than we've done here. I'd also love to see, actually, when we do these park planning things, an as-built right now, contour lines, what's there. We don't have contour lines on any of these. I love contour lines. Some people don't use them, but I do, and it would give us a better impression of where our slopes are. And we'd be able to look at the equipment, perhaps an overlay that shows us where the existing equipment is. I think this can all be accommodated with a bunch of playground equipment that the community values. I don't care whether the parks planners value it. I only care whether the community values it, and I think they really do. They love it, and it's not the best in the world, but it's better than they had, and they're going to continue to value it for another decade. So that was all I had to.
We beat this poor little park together.
Actually, one more. It relates to the power line. If you look at attachment 1, which again will be page 13 of the staff report, it shows the power line, and I assume that Greg was talking about putting it on there.
Brent.
Oh, sorry, with Brent. I two words. Another park where we put a dog park opposite. For those who were here, the dog park was in Miller Park, within sight of the front doors of 8 homes. So the front yard, the 66-foot road, another 60 feet or so, perhaps 150 feet away from the front doors of those homes. And we ended up having to remove it because people didn't want a dog park in their what they considered their front yard. I don't think they'd want it in what they consider their backyard here either. The reason we used the power line at Mariner was because there isn't a home within sight of the dog park on Mariner. And there's when you go there, the dogs bark, and they will bark until 10 o'clock at night. So I'd be really hesitant to locate dog parks near existing residents, or that near existing residents, where we're almost using the residents' back fence as the fence for the dog park. So.
You're going to have it against people on Sobel.
I get that, but they're at least across from a park. I want to, we're going to have to find those locations where we can minimize the impact. The impact on, I think the impact is much less, since most of the dog park doesn't run along a linear path that's between two sets of houses. The proposed dog park has perhaps what I see as 120 feet of frontage, almost wooded frontage against Sobel, so I'm not as uncomfortable with that. That was just my perspective on that. Anybody else? Go. Yeah, but you already spoke.
Yeah,
Sure.
so it has to do with the dog parks again as well, and one of my colleagues talked about whether there are usage statistics kept on the bike things. I want to know if there are usage statistics kept on off-leash dog parks like the one at Glen, and how do we evaluate their effectiveness, and how would we evaluate the effectiveness of Leigh Park? I'm asking this specifically because when this first came up, the initial plans, I was one of a few people that talked about concern that so much space was being given over to an off-leash dog area. Do we have some sort of regular or even irregular monitoring of usage, and compare it to how many people are running their dogs off-leash illegally on adjacent fields?
I don't believe there's any, aside from casual or park attendance and some of the casual surveys, which is just really about how many people we see enjoying our parks that are using the off-leash areas. It is a burgeoning area for us just through the Mundy Park Forest Management Plan. We're getting inundated with comments around the conflicts between dog off-leash and those without dogs. And we're seeing this as an area of need in terms of how we provide, manage, regulate, and there's a whole area here. We do believe the Northeast needs an off-leash area, and I can't provide council with details on usage, but we do intend to follow up on this in the coming months to really really get control of this area a little bit more. I don't think it can be controlled in any municipality, research we've done, but we can certainly try and manage how we dedicate public parks to this use.
So this leads right into the second question that I had. Would this be the off-leash area for Burke Mountain, or would you see potentially 1, 2, 3, or 4 more as we move to the east in the development there?
My personal feeling on just getting into this area of service is that ultimately there would be more as Partington grows. We need a number of areas. At this point, the off-leash strategy really only focused on town center and Glen Park. Historically, we need to expand the range of that and begin to look at the long term, what it means to provide dog off-leash service. How do you best do that and avoid, provide those services to many residents that own dogs and have pets, that aside from those that don't. And I do believe it's really a first, just a beginning, and then we would monitor it and see how it works.
So as you see this developing and monitoring it and perhaps adding more and more dedicated off-leash 24-hour day or whatever, how long parks open off-leash areas, you brought the subject up before about the conflict and concern in Mundy Park. Would you see the city moving away from having mixed-use area like that in Mundy Park and saying off-leash just dedicated to specific areas once we provide enough of them?
We do not know what the research is going to show, what best practices are. There's multiple ways we feel and we find there are dedicated areas in some municipalities. Sometimes there's hour restrictions. We use multitude methods as well. We're really just going to have to continue to look at it and see the best way. We have to remain flexible. We'll take a look.
You were starting to lean in the direction.
No leanings.
Giving us a hint there that you were leaning.
No leanings at all, but I can tell you that just with the population in Smiling Creek and the Hyde, Upper and Lower Hydes, and what we're going to expect in terms of total population in Partington, I mean, we just see people telling us that they're looking for these types of services.
Okay, thank you.
A very quick reminder that in 2010 we ran a referendum question on whether the dog off-leash realities associated with Mundy Park should be increased, diminished, or remain the same. The majority said remain the same, and the rest of them were split between increasing and decreasing. So I don't know that we should contemplate even trying to get the appetite to make changes there. May.
However, on the dog off leash, I don't want to see them go all over the city because I think we've got quite enough. We're doing very well. And it depends on the size of the dogs. People with big dogs are going to be running them on the trails, and that's where they should be. But what we have been doing, when we started with Mundy Park, like Terry had asked, we suggested just doing one loop. But people didn't want to just do the one loop. They wanted to go everywhere. So they've got a time, and they're not operating in them. And as far as I'm concerned right now, we need to hire a couple more bylaw enforcement officers. And if they run into a dog that isn't attached to an owner, they just pick them up and take them back to the shelter. And you can pay your $100, $200, or $500 to get your dog back. And that's about what we're going to have to start doing. And for the people on Glen Park, and they have their dogs running all over, let's just go pick them up. We'll take them back to the shelter, and then they can pay to get their dogs back. Because there can't be rules just for some people and not for everybody. And we're spending a lot of money trying to put dog off-leash parks in, and if people can't respect that, then they don't deserve to be dog owners. Done.
Anybody else? I move receipt of the report.
Second.
In favor? Opposed?
Richard, so just one comment, Richard, is just that we will be coming back to council. We are going to be looking at the playground, seeing whether we can retain that within the concept as directed by council. The bathroom upgrade, we'll be looking at the cost of that, as well as the cost of widening Wilkie and perhaps a larger sports box. So what we've heard from council, we'll look to see whether that can be accommodated in the report that comes back to council.
And if we can't, just figure out some fun way that we can say, oops, we're moving all your hard work. Do you know what I mean? Like, we've got to do this sensitively, because that was a really big deal for those people. One lady said, I've never built a park before. You were there. The kids with their little dinky shovels, and it was really, Kathy Reinheimer spearheaded that, and that was just one huge success.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we have no other business items.
Okay,
Motion to adjourn.
I've got to go get a prescription.
okay, we'll be back in 10 minutes. All in favor, opposed, carried.